And we're off. A UN rocket. Looks like it's on the way to Mars. What do we got on it? We got the crew. We got a thruster. The thruster requires a reactor, and it has a requirement for at least a point of radiator. The reactor doesn't require a radiator, so we've got the 1 point covered. We don't have to worry about the rad hardness because that's the UN's bonus, which is they can prevent you from going through radiation, at least with Earth. If they're going to land inside a radiation zone in any other planet, and there doesn't appear to be one around Mars at all. Not that they can land on Mars, there's no question there. Then they have a potential issue there. And they got a decent robonaut with an ISRU of 2, which means that they can actually cope with either of these little places. So that's kind of promising. It looks like they're probably going to land here on Deimos. NASA was unable to perform their launch, so instead, well, they ended up buying some cards. We've got other people sitting on piles of cards now. Remember, for example, the Chinese can't bid anymore because they have a pile of cards. That's part of why they launched, was to reduce their hand size. But everybody else is able to still bid. So things have been going cheap, but they have been going. A lot of those secondary cards have been eaten up and not going back into the deck, whereas the primary ones that have been used have largely gone, some of them have gone back. So everybody's still been playing with their cards, except, of course, for the UN. And the UN made a landing. Now, that's only a one-size planet, so when they tried prospecting, even with the buggy where they got 2 rolls, they didn't succeed. But, hey, somebody's doing something in the game right now. So, the ESA, European Space Agency or whatever, has launched its own little rocket with no fuel in it. They're using a solar and planning on just going exploring. Now, the way I understand the rules, this sucker can land them on planets even though they don't have fuel. I'm not positive of that, but that's what it seems to imply. Anyway, that's the way I'm playing it right now. So they took off and are heading out Ceres way, but maybe taking opportunities as they go, which again, that seems kind of unrealistic in the sense of, yeah, just from what we understand of spaceflight nowadays, usually you plan something out entirely in advance and it almost always succeeds, instead of, yeah, I'll aim for Ceres, but maybe there'll be a comet that wanders by because somebody else might be doing something that causes comets to move differently or whatever. So that's the kind of thinking you got in this game. Horribly unrealistic, I believe so. Fun, maybe. Some people seem to really enjoy it. I'm not sure yet. But, you know, you've got to have some luck in a game or nobody's going to enjoy it at all. I just feel like the design choices of where the luck are break my suspension of disbelief. The only other person up there is the UN player, who failed to find anything with his rover, and then decided to spend a turn scavenging some water. So he's got more fuel. He can now go someplace else. It was pretty cheap to get there, so he's more willing to try other things, I guess. As is often the case in this game, even in the basic game, NASA ended up with a pile of stuff in space that didn't work. Just a matter of bad planning, whatever. trying to figure out how to use... They were planning on using this Robonaut as their thruster because it's a little cheaper. They could get it to work, and there is in space not a generator, but a reactor, which would help them tremendously. But they just could not convince the ESA to sell that thing for anything that they could afford to pay. So they're at kind of a drawing cards for some kind of useful effect. Because they could move, they could actually get that thruster somewhere, but with all the extra weight, etc., of all the equipment they wanted to take, they didn't have anything. So they pulled this card off the top, a 1-0 thruster, to try to uncover other, more interesting things. And the UN bought it for $1, rather than let NASA have it for free. The UN didn't get to turn it around and sell it right away. Instead, they went and visited another location and found nothing there. So the ESA player has turned, spending his 2 thrust. He can't get further. He's decided to go after this comet. Because there's a little pink thingy there, a little triangle thing, he knows he's going to be able to move the sunspot cycle 1 forward when he hits there. Of course, something horrible could happen or whatever, but that's life. With only 1 other player on the board, he's pretty certain that he can hit that. Of course, this may be a reason for someone else to try to hit one, to try to push that comet out of his reach. Alright. But the PRC and the Shimizu have boosted a whole bunch of crap up there. I think it's enough to make a real mission. They're going to have to collect water. PRC's down to none. Shimizu's at 1. There's no way they can actually do anything with those rockets that they've got up there that I think might be able to reach something. But what I did do is create a couple extra bucks for NASA. NASA bought some more junk, a thruster, hoping to be able to put something together that works eventually. Meanwhile, the UN moved. I gotta check some events there, don't I? They moved up and through 1 pink space, and then down over here. They did a prospecting, but that failed. So they moved this into the yellow zone, and we get a rolling event, and mark who's going with the die. So we roll on the event table, and let's see what happened. I rolled a 2. That's no event. And we're good. Yeah. So the UN didn't refuel. Instead, they took off from here. Spent a bit of fuel moving about, but they got a pretty good thruster here on this thing. And they flew into, oh, that's got a reactor. That's got a solar reactor, doesn't it? Let me make sure they could make all those thrusts. So they were at 4. 1, 2, 3. They couldn't quite make it. So they're going to get 3 fuel back instead. And pull this back, or this one back. So they didn't explore. Okay, but what they did do was they passed through a little pink spot, which, oops, there goes that comet. They just pushed it out of the way from over here. Real cool. Anyway, that just boned the ESA, and they got to try to figure out something else they can do from here, because this is no longer yellow. Unfortunate them. So the ESA is disgusted. They can't figure out anything to do. They initially were heading towards Ceres, but they couldn't land on... they couldn't make it out here, and that's my mistake because of the negative two thrust. So they were taking the shot at the comet, but they got screwed, and they just can't wait around anymore. So they went through and pushed the event marker a couple more spaces. Woo! Moving other comets by coming closer to the sun. But they're making their way back to Earth, and they bought some more garbage. So the futility continues. I don't remember even where I stopped. I know the Shenzhou were collecting money. They kind of have something they think they can launch. NASA is pretty sure they have something they can launch. They calculated it out, and they wanted a little bit more fuel before they launched, so they sold one more car. That I'm sure. And then finally the UN went and failed at another planet. They're probably going to refuel and go look elsewhere. They may just go home because with their fuel, because anywhere they go further is just going further and further out. And you know, I mean, there's interesting stuff out here that they could certainly explore, because they've got a 5 launcher, so they can get, but they require this reactor, so they need the sun. That's what I keep forgetting. So yeah, they have trouble. At -2, they're only a 3, so this actually, oops, I don't know if they could land. They had to pay to land, I guess. Which they can do. But that's kind of painful. So that's an option. They can pay to land on one of those heavier planets. But on the other hand, they could come back and get their little chit for first manned exploration to any site. So it's kind of a crapshoot there. Anyway, they're probably doing the best out of everyone. I mean, you know, they've actually hit planets. Of course, they've destroyed everything that's close and easy to get to. So nobody's really walking away from this at this point with anything good, and it really does look like we're going to have to use the expanded areas of the map, which is kind of cool. But that's all there is.